The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. We are back, comfortably zoned in a vat o' pine tar. I'm with the co-host of this podcast, George Grimm, and he's also the co-author of the book that inspired the podcast, which is incredible because the podcast inspired the book. It's we laugh about that all the time, but George and I are going to get together and have been on a regular basis and just reminiscing about what was good, bad, and indifferent about the experience of publishing a book, self-publishing a book, and George, elaborate on what we were talking about off the air, Noel Hind, how grateful we both are and how he was such a blessing to us along the way.
Oh,
George
yeah.
Grimm.
I mean, Noel was a very big help. Noel was the one who put the book out on Amazon for us. And, it's a whole process. And I certainly would have not been able to do it so quickly and or at all. And we were really lucky to have him help us.
God, this is like looking back on the Bay of Pigs type thing, what it could have been.
Right.
Yes. Because we were really, we both enjoyed writing the book. There's no question about that. Our week-to-week, day-to-day interaction always ran smoothly, and it was, I must say, more play than work. But we both misjudged, me especially, what it would take to publish a manuscript and the difference between a manuscript and a book. And have been reading the manuscript all along, but for the first time this week, I got the actual book in hand. And that led me to a lot of just browsing the book, as I would in a bookstore where I'm buying a book and seeing if anything got my attention and what have you, and admiring the way it was put together. So that is all on you, my friend. It is easy to thumb through, and I'm proud of the content, and you should be proud of all of it. How about that?
Oh, I am. We have 18 chapters, and we have around 70 podcasts in those chapters, and there's something out there for everybody who's interested in baseball. We cover basically anybody who earns a living in baseball in any capacity, on the field, off the field, in the office, the front office. We cover them all, and we go back to the days of Walter O'Malley and Branch Rickey. We go all the way up through Charlie Finley. We talk about George Steinbrenner. It's that whole era from like the 50s through the early late 1990s, I guess.
And ironically, we spend a lot of time on a man who was the subject of one of the first books I read as a cognizant sports fan, and it made such an impression on me. It was called Veck, as in wreck.
Right.
And about Bill Veck, who was the owner of the Browns, the Indians, the White Sox. He just had an incredible career, while in my growing up stages, the book and the follow-up book, The Hustler, or something like that, was just instrumental in this being a reality, because I always wanted to be a fly on the wall, so to speak.
Yep.
And that's what the book, our book, accomplishes. So if anybody just wants to know what it's like to be in that press box, to be in the clubhouse, to ride to the ballpark with Tom Seaver,
right.
And then one day not get to ride in the ballpark with Tom Seaver. That's a little bit in the book, Skip Lockwood's experience. I just had a great time putting it together, and it's fun. You have a number of things you want to talk about. I had just a thought that we talk to a lot of catchers.
Yes.
And I was scanning the Hobie Landreth story. Hobie was the first catcher ever chosen by the New York Mets with the
and
idea.
You know why Casey picked Hobie Landreth with the number one pick?
Right, because with no catcher, you'd have a lot of pass balls.
That's right.
that was a great story, and he gave us some stuff in the interview. What it was like in that first Met spring training.
That's right.
Where all these guys got together. Fading stars, mostly. Guys maybe on the way up that will never get up. And there were 40 of them gathered in spring training in St. Petersburg, and Hobie took us through it. And tell me about how catching, you're a hockey writer,
right,
and how catchers equate to you in your mind with hockey goalies.
Well, it's the same thing. You got to keep the play in front of you, and you wear all the equipment. And I have a nephew who's a very good defensive catcher, and if he was a hockey player, if he was into hockey, he would be a great goaltender, but he's not. And we spoke to Hobie Landreth, we spoke to Ed Hearn, we spoke to John Stearns, maybe a few other ones.
Oh, and we spoke to Duffy Dyer.
Duffy Dyer.
And did he not give us some great stuff? Duffy Dyer is, according to what I read, his daughter Cammie, a Facebook friend of mine, is ailing right now, as is her mother, his wife. And it's kind of serious. I don't know what it is, but she said something about there being a blood clot, and I just want to put out our best wishes to someone who is instrumental in making this, contributing to making our book what it is. So John.
Back to Hobie Landreth. He was one of those guys that you would get his baseball card in a pack of baseball cards back then, and you really didn't know much about him because he always played for Chicago or a team like that, and he was only on the Mets for a short time. But it was really unique for me to be able to write about him, to be able to listen to the podcast and learn more about him. And that was one of the things that I enjoyed about the book. And there's something there's something in probably every chapter. There's something that is unknown to readers. I mean, we've got a story in there about Walter O'Malley and how after the Brooklyn Dodgers season one year, he was going to take a barnstorming trip to Japan, and there was an accountant in the office, an older man who was sickly, not sick, but he wasn't well.
Right.
And he wanted to go on the trip with the Dodgers, and O'Malley was dead set against it because he was worried about how much it was going to cost him to ship the body back if the guy died in Japan. I mean,
that's where his mind was. Walter O'Malley tells you an awful lot about a person's real thought process. You don't have to be a genius to know that this guy was a ruthless. If you're thinking in those terms and ignoring humanity, you're ruthless, plain and simple. And that's the kind of person O'Malley was. I'm convinced that there are few people who are as diabolical. From what I've read and heard and listened to and interviewed, he was looking to move it to L.A. as early as 1953. Wow. Or even earlier, perhaps. But 50. Remember when he moved, when they won in 55, they were the most profitable team in the National League.
Sure.
And so, yes, and the person who gave us that interview was a son, I can't think of his name, Brian Parrott.
It was Harold Parrott. He was a long time employee of the Dodgers in Brooklyn and out in L.A.
And his son Brian gave us a terrific interview about those days, and very, very interesting. We have some stuff you'll never read anywhere else.
Well, there's
just talking
a story there about Mickey Mantle. This came from Tony Castro and Peter Golenbach. How Mickey really fell in love with this woman in New York named Holly Brook, and Tony Castro found out that she was still alive, and he tracked her down, and it turned out that Mickey really wanted to marry her, but his father Mutt really wanted him to marry someone from
hometown,
local girl. So he married a Merlin, and he probably was not happy the rest of his life because of that. And actually, Holly had a part in him wearing his number 7 uniform. He was number 6 when he came up, and Holly told him he should ask for number 7. So he went in, he asked the trainer, and he got number 7. So there's a lot of stories like that in the book that you're probably not going to hear or read anywhere else.
Yeah, there was a lot of pressure on Mantle wearing number 6. You had Babe Ruth number 3, Gehrig number 4, DiMaggio number 5, and it was assumed that give him 6, he's going to be another Hall of Famer. The pressure on it, and he was like 20, 21, a hick from Oklahoma, excusing the redundancy, but what can you say, coming to a big city, and he at first couldn't handle the pressure, and then he got into a thing. He was lucky enough to have buddies. And when I say lucky enough, I put it in quotes. Billy Martin and Whitey Ford, they were quite a threesome, and Castro talks about them in the book.
And we also, there were also rumors about Mickey didn't get along with Joe DiMaggio, but we kind of quelled those rumors too, because they both said that they got along fine. They were teammates for that whole 51 season, I think, and they got along fine.
They did. DiMaggio was not very gregarious. Mantle was apparently the best teammate the Yankees ever had. He was just, you wouldn't know he was a superstar in the clubhouse. He treated people with limited abilities, especially compared to him. And when I say limited, I am comparing it to him, because anybody playing in the major leagues on any level of performance is a world-class athlete.
Yes.
So I got to experience that philosophy when I saw what it working for Topps in the minor leagues. I got to see how good an athlete, a Class A athlete is, let alone a major leaguer.
Yeah.
And we have some stories in there about the minor leagues. And George, we had such a good time. As I sit thumbing through the book day after day on the porch, playing with Facebook and breaking in my baseball glove, I think back, we had good times writing the book. It was good for me. My judge, and I would ask you, I remember asking you almost every week, are you entertained? Is this something? And you'd always give me good feedback, like, oh, wow, I learned this, I learned that. And there were things you learned that you weren't particularly fond of? Just learning, knowing is the booby prize sometime. Anything that stands out in your mind that not fond of, but you go, whoa, this happens. Anything come to mind when I say that?
Well, Billy Martin, I'm really not a big Billy Martin fan, but Peter Golenbach, I think, was speaking to his son, Billy Jr., and that was really a very good interview. I learned a lot about Billy, and I learned about, a lot about why he was the way he was, and I came to appreciate him a lot more than I did before I started writing that interview, and that was very good. I mean, and we've got...
Let me interrupt you for a second. You mentioned Peter Golenbach. Was that the Peter Golenbach that said something about us writing a brilliant book?
He used that word. Yeah, that was... And, Peter is a writer, and he knows the value of words. So he just doesn't throw that out there willy-nilly,
And you and I... He was just agreeing with something that we were thinking all along. Can't be modest about this. It's the last, especially for me, it's my last go around. I think we got a hell of a book. And I joke about Peter Golenbach. He wrote the foreword of the book. He is instrumental in providing reams and reams of interviews with not only me, Alan Blumpkin, like you say, Tony Castro, but we had people like Bobby Brown on, the commissioner, people that he had interviewed years ago writing Dynasty. And so Peter was instrumental, of course, in this whole thing. What I like about the book, thumbing through it, every one of the regulars on the podcast network show their mettle in one way or the other in these interviews. And I'm reminded of what somebody asked me long before I met you, long before I thought about a book, I was thinking about self-promotion or self-promoting Comfortably Zoned, the network and what have you. And at that point, I thought, I was asked, and I said, we're all getting up there. The majority of the folks who are involved in this are in their 70s and 80s, all in good voice, good mind. But I said, I'd just like to pay homage to I'd like the podcast network to go viral, to pay homage to the good work that they did. And ironically, 6 years later, the book is a tribute to them, and you included, who are part of the podcast network. Nice. So it's been cool beans, George, these last few weeks of being published authors.
Good. We were talking about Walter O'Malley being such a bastard. The opposite side of that coin is a guy like Carl Erskine, who we interviewed, or you interviewed, and he was just so thankful to be a member of the Brooklyn Dodgers, and at the end of the podcast, he just said he wakes up every day and thanks God that he was a Dodger and that he lived in Brooklyn and he loved living in Brooklyn and playing for the Dodgers, and it was such a nice ending to a nice podcast, because he sounded like a really sincere man,
He's in his 90s, has not missed a beat yet, and the fact that there are some of us who are living long lives and keeping all our marbles at the same time, it's very encouraging. When you hear Erskine's interviews, was very cognizant. It wasn't like they were wheeling him out there like we've seen done many times before with people. All of the folks that we're talking to, Ralph Terry, Art Ditmar, the same, the aforementioned Toby Landreth, a fellow who we interviewed was Mudcat Grant, and since then he's passed away. But he was in good voice, and at the time of the interview, and it was my Walter Mitty is coming out like, hey, this is Mudcat Grant, and here I am.
That's right. What am I doing here? How did I get here?
When am I going to wake up? Are they going to pinch me? George, I feel the same way when doing these podcasts with you. This was a good one. I'm enjoying your friendship and have for going on 2 years now. This experience of sharing a book. They can't take that away from me.
No. Well, before we go, one of the things that I regretted about the book is that I couldn't include your Bob Shepard imitation. We were writing about Sherry Davis, and you met her while you were standing in line waiting to audition for the job of the San Francisco Giants announcer. And
I did, public address announcer.
And you probably tried out your Bob Shepard imitation on her a couple times, and you've done it a couple times on the podcast. But I couldn't put it in the book because it's words, it's not sound. So
what you couldn't put into the book, it was a portion of my comedy routine doing Bob Shepard. I would the premise would be Bob Shepard calling out for a couple of hookers. Good afternoon. This is Bob Shepard. Is April there? But what can I say? That was not very many people on the comedy circuit knew Bob Shepard, but he had a delightful voice. And I'll put something out there about the difference between players today and yesterday. Bob Shepard passed away. The voice, the public address announcer voice. Derek Jeter had wanted to keep Bob Shepard's voice as his introduction for the rest of his career, which I think he did, and what have you. His funeral was an off day for the Yankees, and they were home. Mm-hmm. And not one attendee was a Yankee.
Wow.
Yeah. It just, for whatever baseball society is turned into, sometimes we just have to be happier with our memories, and nostalgia is a beautiful thing. Not that we don't stay in the present in the book and look towards the future, but looking back is nice, and it all stems from your article that you wrote about being retired. You wrote an article about me, Missed the Podcast, that appeared in Senior Magazine, and it inspired the book. And a lot was said about looking back. What do you do as a senior? How do you adjust to wanting to have a say in life?
Right.
And podcasting and writing and involves getting it out there, whatever it is, whatever your word is, whatever the subject is, and how cathartic that is can't be put into words. Like I hold the book and I thumb through it and I go, whoa. It makes, I said that, they said that, wow, makes me feel good. Folks out there reading the book, thinking about buying the book, it makes an excellent holiday gift. And it isn't yet, but will be in a day or so, available in hardcover. It's available in paperback on Amazon, on Kindle, and it is going to be on Audible. My good friend, Eric Linneberg, is a major league announcer, and he's looking forward to the project of putting it on Audible, and I'm delighted for that, and wouldn't be possible without George Grimm.
Well, they are your podcast. You have to figure too. As thick as that book is, 500 some pages. That's a fraction of all your podcasts. I mean,
we left some out that I'm sorry. We left some out that we couldn't get in. 500 pages. Will there be a sequel to the book? I don't think we could go through that again, because we don't have to. It's so much fun talking about the stories of this can be our nostalgia, the stories. And I really we set this up initially to entice, if you will, people to read the book. Now that I see the book as its formatted. I just had access to manuscripts along the way, which were terrific, but the way it's formatted and the few pictures that we sneak in there, and your headlining for each chapter. Can't thank you enough, George.
No problem, Ralph. Anytime.
All right, we will talk next week, same time, same place, and stay healthy.
I will. You too, Ralph.
All right. Thanks. Thanks for listening, everybody. Comfortably Owned Radio Network, Comfortably Owned. I'm Ralph Tyko. George Grimm is the co-host, co-writer. Thank you again, everybody, for listening. Adios and happy trails.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.